Okay, I'm going to start here. This is something I'm not used to doing either. I've never talked in front of a camera. Uh, but to get ahead of myself a little bit, I had Cindy in a assisted living. I'm going to kind of lighten the thing. I'm going to jump ahead after I actually had the diagnosis and tell a little incident. There are a couple of short stories. My wife liked to watch As the World, or as the Wheel of Fortune. That was one of her favorites, and we were all sitting in a cluster there. There must have been 10 of us there. And we were sitting there watching it, and she looked over at me and she says, do you want to go have sex? Now, that wasn't the exact words, but that's what that came out. And what do you say? There was no filter. Another time she'd broken an ankle, and I had her at Stanford and Fargo there, and to the clinic one day, and she a lady walked by and she says, boy, is she fat. Like, again, and you kind of look at him, you don't know what to say. But what I'm going to talk about now is early diagnosis. Before I even knew it, I was kind of oblivious to it. I didn't know what was going on, and some of the incidents that happened. She was taught school for 37 years. And one morning, I heard this commotion in the bathroom, and I didn't know what was going on. And a couple of minutes later, I heard action or things going on in the kitchen. And I thought, what's going on? And I come out and I said, what are you doing? And she says, I'm waiting for my carpool. And I said, I asked her, I said, well, when did they start having school on Sunday? And then she kind of laughed and came back to bed. Then there was other things that happened along the way. She was having trouble balancing a checkbook, and I got to the point where I just finally told her, I says, paying bills, I didn't know what was going on. I mean, I told her, I said, I tell you what I do, I'll start paying the bills, and I'm just going to give you cash. So I gave her $500 every month. That went on for about 6-7 months. Other things that happened was she was going to go donate blood out at the church on the West End there. And the night before, I got to thinking, she said, I'm going to go out and look where the church is at. And I says, well, the church is out on the West End there. But she drove out there and came back. And I never thought anything of it. You don't expect anything like that, at that age. Some of the other things that happened were, I happened to notice she was on the computer and emails, and there was like 5,000-6,000 emails, and I don't exaggerate that. And I kind of wondering, and of course, when I'd come, she'd shut the computer off. And she came right out and told me another time, she said, I haven't showered for a week. And I said, what do you mean you haven't showered for a week? And I said, why haven't you showered? She said, well, I guess I'm just lazy. She always cleaned the house. I mean, and the house cleaning kind of dropped off, and she didn't really care about that. And I never paid too much attention. She was still teaching school at the time, and there was things going on at the school that I wasn't aware of. And with the frontal lobe dementia, the experts tell me that it can kind of go on unnoticed because they're in such a routine. Well, the schools were consolidating, and they'd asked her to resign. And of course, she was the last teacher that had been there. So I figured, they're going to cut costs and they're going to cut some teachers, So she retired. And after she retired, I told her that we were going on an elk hunt. And I said, you can ride to Denver with us at the time and go, visit your sister. Well, that was fine. Well, about every day she'd ask me, when are we going? And I finally got fairly upset with her. And I, told her, I said, if you can't remember, just write it down. And anyway, we went on that. And she kept wearing the same clothes, when she was going to school. A lot of times she'd wear the same dress the day after day. And, and I basically thought, well, she probably just likes that dress. I mean, you've got 50 new sweaters in the thing that haven't been touched yet, but she wore the same thing, for 2 or 3 days. Then what happened was that, and I had no idea what was going on, but then what happened was one time we were going to a banquet, and she was always the head of his food service at the Eagles. That was kind of her spending money. She would work at the Eagles and was head of the food service there. And there was a banquet in Fargo, one that I was involved with, and I said, are you going along? And she said, yeah, I can go along. And she said, the wedding that was planned, she said, was canceled. Well, the wedding had not been canceled. And of course, the manager called her on Sunday and asked where she had been. She said, oh, I thought it was canceled. And they said, no, it wasn't. And they had to scramble to get people to help. Well, then what finally happened, a couple funny things actually happened was I had 4 French Brittany's that I was training for my hunting business, and I had them at the house there, and she always asked, can I take them down to the doggy park? And I said, yeah, I take them down one at a time. So she would put the leash on. I said, one at a time. Well, she put the leashes on all 4 of them. You can imagine these French Brittany's, first thing you know, they were dragging her across the yard, and she would call me because I was away up at 70 miles away at my business. And she said the dogs got away, and they were running all over town, and they were down at the dog kennel, and the police had picked them up. And then I'd mentioned to her, I said, you can't do that. You can only take one at a time. Well, this happened like 3 times. And people were looking, where are the dogs? Well, they're running by the car dealership. They're running up by the airport. So there were a few things that happened. Then what kind of brought it to a head was she was going to, her nieces had a bridal or a baby shower in Minneapolis. Is when I finally started noticing something. And my aunt had passed away in Green Bay, and I told her, I said, I think I'm going to go to the funeral. I said, I can go with you now, and I'll just drop. I said, you want to go to the funeral? No, I'll just get off in Minneapolis and stay with my sister-in-law. And I said, that's fine. And so the next morning I got up and I said, I'm going to go down to coffee, visit the guys. And I says, then I'm going to fill with gas and I'll come back. And she told me she wasn't going to the funeral. I come back and she's all dressed in black. And I said, what are you doing? Then she said, why are we going to that funeral? And I said, you told me you weren't going. And in the meantime, I had given her $700 the week before because I had a few extra dollars, and I gave her $700. And I says, I asked her, I says, you all packed? Yeah, I was packed the night before. And she was the type that was always packed. But when she gets down there, all she had on was the clothes she was wearing, and a little bag and a toothbrush. And I told her the night before, I says, you have money today, don't you? And she says, no. This was on Friday. I had given her $700 in cash. And by Monday, when I asked her, I says, you have money? She says, no. And I said, you're telling me you spent $700 since Friday? I said, what'd you do with it? She says, I must have spent it. So I don't know if it ever got put away someplace or whatever happened. But so I thought, when I get back from this trip, I'm going to have her checked out. And I had it already because she stayed the weekend, and I got back and I made an appointment. And that Monday they did an MRI, and that's when they said that she had frontal temporal lobe dementia. And then I basically asked what that meant. They said, you're basically looking at 5 years. So that's kind of the end of my story. I mean, I could, go on a lot of the other stuff that happened, and I had some very good guidance and advice from about a month after. I contacted the Alzheimer's Association, and they gave me some very good advice. She said, I know your personality. And she says, a lot of people like to take care of them as long as they can. And we tried that, but it gets to a point where you can't do it. And now not everybody's the same. Everybody reacts a little bit. And I just kind of made up my mind, I'm going to make the best out of a bad situation. And there were a lot of good things happened.